Ah, Superman. Dark and brooding, the Man of Steel is generally violent and uncaring. Oh wait, no he's fucking not! While it's true that Superman has come a long way from his creator's vision of a modern-day Hercules, the Big Blue Boy Scout has always been a force for pure good in the DC universe, barring the occasional mind control. He's an inspiration, a savior, a simple boy from Kansas. When written poorly, he can be smug and selfish, even a complete asshole. This video isn't about those issues. It's about when a creator just gets it and absolutely nails what the character is about. Mandatory spoiler warning. I'll be going into some detail here, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't read these books anyway. So here's 4 amazing Superman arcs you should definitely check out. Number 4. The Death of Superman. Has there ever been a more talked about event in Superman's long history? The answer's no. But before I talk about it, I want to mention a stylistic flourish that I found interesting. In the collected volume, the book starts with a few pages of Doomsday punching his way out of his cell, ending up free in a pose that is mirrored by Superman on the very next page. It's a pretty nice touch. Our story begins, and we get an introduction to the antagonist. Doomsday, covered head to toe by jumpsuit, holds out a hand and a bird lands on it. Then he crushes it, establishing exactly what he's all about. With this, Doomsday's rampage begins, and yeah, it's a bloody one. Unfortunately, Superman's not immediately available due to being in an interview, so the Justice League goes after the monster. Not the actual good Justice League, though, a diminished version. One that is not up to the task of beating Doomsday. Eventually, Superman is forced to get involved. So the fight is on. Everyone watching is flabbergasted that this new threat can go blow for blow with the Man of Steel, including Lois Lane, who's reporting on the struggle, and the Kents, who are watching back in Smallville. True to his nature, Superman actually forgoes a few opportunities to finish the fight, or at least press his advantage, in order to save innocent people caught in the crossfire. This nobility only serves to prolong what is already a knockdown, drag-out brawl. Superman comes to realize that in order to win, he'll have to go as hard as he can, harder than in any fight he's ever had. Finally, Doomsday falls. Utterly spent, Superman collapses and is scooped up and cradled by Lois. With his dying words, he asks if he's done it, if he's saved everyone. Then he's gone. His torn cape a monument to a man who offered up the ultimate sacrifice. Number 3. World Without a Superman. Now, I could have combined this one with the previous, but since they're so thematically different, I've decided to split them up. Besides, if I did that, I'd only have 3 entries, so... We start in the immediate aftermath of the cataclysmic Doomsday fight. As paramedics try to resuscitate Superman, the cops and the superheroes who arrive just slightly too late are in shock, unable to comprehend the idea that Superman, lay dead before them. Back in Smallville, the Kents embrace, praying that the reporters are wrong and that they didn't just witness their son's final battle. They know their prayers won't be answered. Among the people reporting are Superman's friends, as well as Lois Lane, Superman's wife, and one of the few people who know that Superman is in fact Clark Kent. All of her consummate professionalism is just barely enough to keep her from breaking down as she turns in her article. Now, I know that DC brings Superman back, and I know this may seem to warrant a giant bucket of ice water being thrown on any passion this book brings out. But please, don't let that fact detract from the profound sense of loss that permeates this book. It's crushing, and we get to see just how much Superman meant to those he was close to, both in a good and a bad way. A friend of Superman, Bibbo, prays alone in his bar, wondering why someone like Superman has to die while a washed-up old worthless loser like himself gets to keep on living. He's not the only one hurting, though, as we move into the fallen hero's funeral. All the Justice League members are marching in the procession, save one. Batman, arguably one of Superman's best friends, doesn't actually attend the funeral. He simply can't shut off, so he keeps watch over the event. It's an interesting character moment. Also unable to attend are the Kents. After all, why would some no-name farmers from Smallville ever be invited to Superman's funeral? So they're forced to settle for TV coverage as their son is laid to rest. Finally unable to stand it, the Kents hold a memorial of their own, burying a small box of Clark's childhood effects. When they go back inside, they receive a distraught phone call from Lois. Now, in their minds, it's no longer about them. She's suffering. So they rush over to support her, to be strong for her, and we see just where Clark got the best of his nature. Number 2. Superman for all seasons. Next up is Superman for all seasons. This story is broken up into 4 separate parts, each named after a season, obviously. Every season is told from the point of view of a different person in Superman's life, and they highlight how Superman affects the people he interacts with. We start the story with Spring, narrated by Pa Kent, which is set just before Clark graduates and heads off to Metropolis. Like any good parent, Pa's worrying if he's raised his kid right. A worry compounded by Clark's astounding abilities. But he doesn't have too much time for anxiety, as a Twister chooses that time to hit. There's no tragedy thanks to Clark's developing powers, just a bit of destruction. And that's when Clark puts Pa Kent's mind at ease. Instead of reveling in his gifts, Clark is more concerned with whether or not he could have done more. Clark shows that he truly cares about people. Then the story moves to summer, with Lois Lane providing the commentary. We get to see how a Superman shapes the worldview of a long-hardened journalist, not through an epic, earth-shattering battle. Indeed, none of the action in this book gets any larger than city level, but in a series of relatively mundane superheroics. Mr. Loeb doesn't need a planet-killing threat to underscore what the Man of Steel means. To Lois, Superman offers an answer for her cynicism. After all the horrible things she's reported on, after all the awful things she's seen people do to each other, Superman brings hope into her life. Fall comes, the season of contrast. The bounty accrued throughout summer gives way to the barrenness of winter, and thus we turn from the crusading Lois Lane to hear the thoughts of the conniving Lex Luthor. This gives us the chance to see Superman through the lens of opposition. So far in the story, Lex Luthor has been struggling. Every attempt to gain prominence and exert even more control over Metropolis has been thwarted by Superman. Therefore, in order to get one over on his self-determined rival, Lex unleashes a horrible airborne virus. Superman has no way to stop the situation himself. Indeed, by the time he's aware that it's happening, it's already too late. Only Luthor has the key to saving the city. Superman must beg for the help of his biggest antagonist, just as Luthor planned. It is in this confrontation that the contrasts come into play. Even though it's embarrassing, even with all of his powers, Superman isn't above asking for aid if it means he can save people. Something the prideful Lex Luthor would never do. We are shown how cruel the corrupt industrialist is in creating this situation to avenge petty slights against him, even going so far as to enlist a young woman that was saved by Superman to help him develop the virus, promising a chance to catch Superman's eye. And we're shown how much even one death hurts Superman when that self-same woman sacrifices herself to eradicate the virus, the only casualty in the event. Thus we arrive at winter. Lana Lane, Clark Kent's childhood friend, is our guide for this last part. Clark has retreated to his hometown after what he considers his failure. He reconnects with his parents, with the townspeople, and with his old friends, Lana included. Much is the same as it was long ago, but even in the steadfast Smallville, things evolve. This is best shown when Clark returns to the diner he and his friends frequented when they were younger to see the same group of retirees playing cards. -1. After a bit of reacquainting to the town and venting of his worries to Lana, Clark is made aware of a new problem via an evening visit from Officer Parker. A local river is flooding its banks, which completes the mirroring of challenges in this book. We go from nature, with the tornado, to the man-made threats, to man-made, and finally back to nature. Anyway, with this seemingly perfunctory action by the cop, the book highlights an interesting point. Many people throughout comics and in real life seem bewildered by Superman's chosen path. He has so much power, and yet he spends his time saving people? But why? Wouldn't he use his gifts in a more self-serving manner? These same people never even bat an eye when they hear about police officers saving people, or about firefighters running into burning buildings. After all, they have the skills and the training to do that stuff. Officer Parker could have stayed inside and out of the freezing weather, but he has responsibilities that come with the power he was granted. Furthermore, it's in his character to want to help. Well, Superman's the same way. So when trouble strikes, we get a speech from Lana that elaborates on the theme of this part. See, when they both left to follow their dreams, Lana's didn't turn out so great. She hasn't really lived up to what she thought she wanted, and like Clark, she started this part pretty down on herself. But as she's interacted with him, she's realized something. Life changes dreams, and life can be hard, but you have to pick yourself up. When it starts throwing curveballs at you, you've got to adapt and keep moving, even if it's on a different path than what you originally thought you'd be walking. Clark's always wanted to save everybody, but he can't. He's never been able to. All he can do, all any of us can do, is try. And it's the fact that he always will that makes him super. As a final side note to this book, I'd like to highlight something. There's a through line in the story of a little kid who's constantly being saved by Superman. After one of the subsequent savings, Superman introduces himself formally. Not every hero is so personable. Number 1. All-Star Superman. Was there ever any doubt that this would be in the number 1 spot? Well, maybe if you're actually here for tips on where to start with Superman. And in truth, if there was one story that provided the definitive Superman experience, it's this one. To the point where if you only read this one, you would still have a complete picture of who Superman is as a character, as a legend, and as an inspiration. Grant Morrison perfectly captures the adventurous spirit of the Silver Age, but with good writing this time, while at the same time tying the character back to his mythological origins with Superman's final, fatal 12 labors. Hell, even in the little things this book shines. From Richard Branson doppelganger Leo Quintum to the fact that even when he's going incognito as Clark Kent, Superman continues to save people through his bumbling. Even the fact that Lex Luthor draws his eyebrows on contributes to if not a sense of lightness, then at least a sense of, I don't know, familiarity? If that's the right word. But let's back up for now. The book starts with a story we all probably know by now, Superman's origins. This is also probably the best version we've ever seen. No long, drawn-out scenes or pointless action, because that's not what matters. It's the myth, not the minutia, that's so indelible and pervasive, not only in American culture, but throughout the world. From this, we travel to the outermost sphere of the sun, in the midst of Lex Luthor's latest plan to kill Superman. The one that works. Now more powerful than ever and poisoned from the exposure, Superman sets about completing his last 12 acts. Knowing he's about to die, he starts letting people in on his secrets, and giving those he trusts the means to carry on without him. All throughout, he displays his trademark kindness, even to those who'd up to that point held nothing but contempt for him, such as when he helped save the lives of 2 Kryptonian survivors that had been caught in a cloud of kryptonite out in space. With the Phantom Zone, but still. Or when he prevented the suicide of a troubled young girl by being there for her when her therapist couldn't. I can say without reservation that this is one of the most important scenes in Superman's history. Speaking of important, remember that Doomsday fight? It's here too, albeit in a reimagined way. There's also a couple of interesting, somewhat random bits I'd like to highlight. The first is the mini-universe that Superman creates as part of his 12 labors. Looking into Earth Q, as it's called, we see a progression of philosophers, innovators, and ultimately 2 down-on-their-luck comic creators about to unveil their latest hero. It seems that life is always driven towards philosophy and hope, always striving towards an ideal. At least, that's how I interpret it. The second is Lex's continuous claim that if Superman wasn't here, he could have saved the human race, which is ultimately thrown back in his face. He even has a breakdown when he gets to see the world as Superman does. Now I know this one isn't as long as one of the others on this list, despite All-Star's higher place. Honestly, it's because it's hard to describe just how good this book is. It simply is. It's a love letter of sorts and reflects, as its dying main character does, on the amazing life of Superman. His adventures, his friends and loved ones, and all those he inspired. Both real and fictional. So that's it. Those are 4 of the greatest Superman stories ever. But what are some of your favorites? Leave a comment below. Like, subscribe, follow on Twitter, and have a super day.